Hi guys. So I've got my piece of leather all cut out now, and you can see I've drawn on it a bunch. I've got the rough outline of where the different pieces are going, so I can put lines on to kind of find out where I'm putting my scales. But the big one is I'm doing it based on these landmarks that are on the costume, like where there's these two belts that run here, and then there's the big back vein thing and the upper chest piece of the armor. So I did those on, and then I'm doing my rows in comparison to those objects. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start marking in all of where these little, if you can see them, there, you can see I started just those 4 of them, and that's the bottom of each part of each scale. So what I do is I look on my reference, and I've got it right here on my computer, all nice and blown up, and I know that there's 4 scales that poke out of the bottom of that, so I drew 4 scales on, and I'm going to do that with the rest of this. If there's 7 scales between here and here on that row, I'm going to mark that there's 7 there, draw the 7 of them, and then make them work with the next, I think it'd probably be 5 that are on top of it, because you take 1 off each side. It's kind of like stacking bricks. I'm going to draw all of them on here, and that's how I'm going to finish getting that marked in. So I finished marking out all my scales on the leather. Ta-da! And I also did a test piece to find out what else I needed to do. And I found out that if you look there, these scales are slightly darker than these scales. That's because I needed to knock back the graphite that I put on here and actually erase quite a bit of it so that it doesn't show up once I dye it. Once I get this all knocked back, we can go over actual tooling. Okay guys, I'm not going to lean down here the entire time. I had to zoom in so I could actually show you what I was doing as far as tooling goes. It's a couple days later from when I previously did that. As you can tell, I have quite a few of them actually done. This is just how I'm going over each one, and I do this in just kind of a row and get through it. What I do is I just have a little Tupperware container here full of water and a little rag. I used it in some previous videos, and I just get the leather wet and I let it sit there for a little bit. You don't need to get it sopping wet. Like, it doesn't need to be like hold it up and it's dripping kind of a thing. It just needs to be damp enough that it might show on the back, but you don't really need it to. It doesn't even need to be that damp. And if it gets to the point where there's like water down here, it's probably too wet. So you get it that damp, and then you use what's called a swivel knife. There's a bunch of videos on YouTube on how to use a swivel knife and also how to use leather punches. I taped this one, and I'll explain why in a second. But you just use your swivel knife, and you look on here real carefully, because I erased as much of the line as I could. I have to look real carefully on where I'm putting each of these cuts, and then I just cut out the shape of the bottom part of one of the scales, and I do that for 3 in a row, or in a column actually. Come down to here, do this one, and then the bottom one. And I generally work from the top to the bottom, this going down. It just is a little bit easier on me because it does the top part of it. But you don't really have to. You can go anyway, just as long as you follow your lines. My suggestion, though, would be do one side, then do the other. Otherwise, you get a really rounded edge on the bottom, and you don't quite get the point that there is on a lot of his scales. So once you do that, I'll show you why I have this one covered in a bunch of tape. It's because I'm not actually using a mallet to do most of my tooling. Most of my tooling, what I do is I take this tool and I turn it on its edge and I cant it sideways, so I'm only using one part of a little part of it, and I just push it and run it up. And I do that on the other edge, and that's to get the center kind of ridge, because that ridge isn't actually like, it's just that the area around it is depressed, and then you want the outer edge to be raised as well, so you have to depress all of this, and I'm just pushing on it. So that's why I have all this tape on here, is A, so I can get a little bit better grip, and B, so I not holding on to something smaller, thinner than a pencil, and trying to cramp my hand to death even more, because this is already pretty taxing on your hand. So I just kind of push that all down as best as I can. And I'm getting pretty good at it. The ones that I had starting up here were way worse, and they've gotten a lot better as I came down the back of the vest, which is a good thing considering this is all Under Armour, so it doesn't really matter as much. But once I get this all kind of pushed in like that, if you can see that, I think you can see that. Let's zoom in. So once I get this all pushed in like that, now I'll actually take the mallet, because this is what I want hammered down the most, and I'll start up here at the top and I'll work my way down, kind of like this, if I can get the shadow out of the way. And I'll actually be tapping it with the mallet so that the edge right next to the scale on top is the farthest down, so it looks like it's underneath the other scales. And then I just kind of buff the edge where it meets with what I push down a little bit, so there's no ridge. And you can kind of see that at the top here, I'm cantering at an angle. What you generally want to do with a punch is hold it straight up and down, but if I did that, I'd actually be ending up putting a little bit of the punch onto this scale, and that's what I don't want to do. So I'll cant it at the top here, and I'll tap, and then as I bring it down the scale, I'll straighten it up a bit. And I'll finish at the bottom all nice and flat. And there's a little bit of an edge there that I don't want, so I just kind of flatten that down. And there, I have one scale. When I'm just trying to crank them out, they generally take me about 2 minutes. So far, I have 315 of them. Ooh, look at that. That's how I do a scale, and I go from the bottom to the top when I'm doing these, because if I went top down, I would end up, as I did the top edge here, I would end up messing with the one slightly above it, and if I do the one above it last, it doesn't matter. These tend to get a little bit harder, so they aren't as easy to mess with. Anyways, that's how I'm working on the vest and how I got it patterned and scales going. I've got a ways cut out for me, but it's just busy work at this time. If you like my videos of the work I'm doing, please subscribe. If you have any comments, put them down, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Also, last but not least, if you're trying to copy this exactly, I've got my patterns as a perk on my Patreon. So head over there if you want to see some really cool perks. Anyways, thanks for watching.